Hey everybody, Mark Dawes here. Now I want to share a couple of cases with you in relation to deaths in restraint because I think they're relevant and hopefully we can get some learning from this. And the first one is the case of Michael Thorley, and the inquest here finds hospital patient restrained by security guard was unlawfully killed. And this was reported on the 5th of November last year. And it says here, Michael Thorley was 41 years old when he died on the 20th of September 2017, following a period of restraint by a security guard at Wythenshawe Hospital in Manchester, where he was a patient. The inquest into his death concluded on Tuesday, the 2nd of November last year, with the jury finding that he was unlawfully killed. The jury also concluded that it was not necessary for the security guard to restrain Michael when he did, and there was a failure by nursing staff to monitor Michael's condition during the restraint. Both these factors were found by the jury to have probably caused or contributed to Michael's death. Further, the following issues were found to have possibly contributed to his death. The force used during restraint was unreasonable, disproportionate and or excessive. The trust did not make appropriate security arrangements in respect of Michael, and there were errors in Michael's clinical management. Now it goes on to say here that Michael was admitted to Wythenshawe Hospital run by Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust after attending A&E on the 19th of December 2017. He was complaining of shortness of breath, and initial investigations indicated he may be suffering from an infection, and he was transferred to a bed in the acute medical unit. Michael was also treated for a significantly increased heart rate and started on an alcohol withdrawal regime. This involved the prescription of a sedative used in withdrawal treatment and monitoring of withdrawal symptoms. It was accepted by the medical staff during the course of the inquest that formal monitoring in this respect did not take place as it should have done. Initially it appeared Michael was improving, however during the afternoon of the 21st of December 2017 he started to exhibit behaviour consistent with delirium. Just after 11 p.m. Michael called 999 and reported to police that he did not feel safe in hospital. A nurse told the call handler that Michael was in fact safe. Michael told nursing staff he did not know why he was there or what was happening and he wanted to go home. Around 1:23 a.m. Michael pulled the emergency cord whilst using the toilet. Staff attended and found he was having a seizure. Following the seizure, Michael became very agitated and a decision was taken to call security. 2 security guards initially attended. In evidence at the inquest, they described Michael as appearing confused. They were later replaced by 1 security guard who was deployed to carry out bed watch. At the time of Michael's death, the role of the bed watch was not defined. Guards required a license of the type a bouncer at a nightclub would need, a Level 2 Door Supervisor Security Industry Authority (SIA) license. The Trust specified no further training for guards to fulfill the role in a hospital setting. They also had no policy on dealing with the use of physical intervention, i.e. restraint. While the security guard undertook bed watch, Michael started to stand at the window and shout help to a passerby whilst banging on the glass. A nurse reported that the security guard was trying to restrain Michael to move him away from the window. The nurse told him to leave Michael alone, fearing that physical intervention would make things worse. Following an apparent altercation with Michael and the nurse, Michael continued to stare out the window and bang on the glass. This prompted the security guard to use force to try and get Michael to sit or lie down. An altercation ensued and Michael was forced onto and restrained on the floor. The security guard noticed that Michael became exhausted but continued to restrain him. A member of nursing staff intervened after noticing that Michael was no longer moving and found that Michael was not breathing. He had suffered a cardiorespiratory arrest. Michael was pronounced dead after a lengthy resuscitation attempts. In breach of the Trust's own suspicious death investigation protocols, there was a period of approximately 5 hours before the hospital referred the incident to the police. The family were not informed of the death until the following morning. Now, one of the things that's come out here is this part. This is Claire Hilder of Brodie Jackson Cantor Solicitors, who represented a family, said, Michael was in hospital because he was acutely unwell. His challenging behaviour was a result of delirium, possibly contributed by failings in his clinical care. Of course, it is appropriate that hospitals require security staff. However, it's important they are properly trained. The role of bed watch is not compatible to a bouncer on the door at a nightclub, yet this was the only qualification the trust specified someone needed to undertake the role at the time of Michael's death. Ultimately, physical intervention should be a last resort, and bedwatch guards should have a clear understanding of the increased risk it poses to patients in hospital who, as a result of their medical conditions, are vulnerable. Where such restraint takes place, it is important medical staff understand the role they should take to ensure patient is kept safe. And, like I said, this was a case that was heard in November last year, which was concluded, which led to the inquest finding that the force used during restraint was unreasonable, disproportionate, and/or excessive. The trust did not make appropriate security arrangements in respect of Michael, and there were errors in Michael's clinical management. In short, the training given to door supervisors with the SIA license is appropriate for people working on the door of a licensed venue only. It does not correlate over to staff who need to work with vulnerable patients. There are different risk factors there. And again, a lack of training, a lack of upskilling is a major part in this, which resulted in this person dying. The other case, which has similar connotations, is the case of Jason Lennon. And it says here, damning inquest conclusions on restraint by security guards of black man in mental health crisis. And it says here, and this was 11th of February this year, so this is more recent. It says, Jason Lennon was experiencing a mental health crisis when he was subject to restraint by security guards inside London's Excel Centre on the 31st of July 2019. The inquest into his death today concluded with a jury making serious and wide-ranging criticisms of East London mental health services engaged in Jason's care prior to the incident, and of the excessive and unreasonable restraint used by licensed security guards. The jury found that Jason Lennon died of a cardiorespiratory arrest which he suffered at the Excel Centre in London on the 31st of July 2019 due to restraint in the prone position following an acute psychotic episode. This is the fourth inquest in the past year in which restraint by security staff has been criticised and found to contribute to a death. Now, this case goes on, and I'm going to leave links under the video so you can read the full thing. But you can see here that the jury heard that in September 2002, Jason suffered a brain injury. He was later diagnosed and began receiving treatment for schizophrenic illness. In the 5 years before his death, he had required inpatient care 5 times, and his relapses followed a predictable pattern each time. He had previously responded quickly and well to medication and inpatient treatment. Towards the end of 2019, Jason's support workers identified the signs of a further relapse. They brought Jason to his community mental health team, Newham Community Recovery Team, and the inquest heard evidence that in the days before Jason's death, there were issues with preparation, assessments and planning by this team, and that they did not appreciate the urgency of the situation. On the morning of the 31st July 2019, Jason was seen behaving strangely and recklessly in and around London's Excel Centre, potentially putting himself and others at risk. He was in fact experiencing an acute psychotic episode. Just after 7:30 a.m., secure ops security guards inside the venue brought Jason to the ground and restrained him with considerable force and in the prone position for about 5 minutes. Security guards are licensed by the Security Industry Authority, brackets SIA, close brackets, and are trained that ground restraint, particularly in a face-down position, is dangerous and should be avoided. The Metropolitan Police arrived on the scene at around 7:35 a.m. and found Jason unresponsive. They commenced CPR at around 7:39 a.m. An ambulance arrived on the scene and Jason was taken to Newham General Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 9:31 a.m. The jury ultimately concluded that the security guards had used excessive force in effecting the restraint and had failed to respond to the fact that Jason was becoming unresponsive. They found that too many people had been involved in the restraint and that no one had led or managed this or checked Jason's vital signs. And again, I'll leave a link under the video where you can actually go and read this article yourself. But just coming down to the conclusions here, the jury found that Jason died from cardiorespiratory arrest due to restraint in the prone position following an acute psychotic episode. In a narrative conclusion, they made serious criticisms of both the mental health services and security guards. The jury concluded that a number of errors by Newham CRT caused or contributed to Jason's death. They said the management of Jason's care, the assessment of risk he posed to himself and others, and plan formulated for Jason's care were all inadequate. The jury also identified missed opportunities to put Jason on a care program approach and for Jason to benefit from the care of the home treatment team. They found the communication with Jason's supportive living provider was ineffective, and his care was not discussed at multidisciplinary meetings as it should have been. The jury further noted that outpatient reviews were too far apart. In fact, the inquest heard that when he was brought to the CRT on the 29th of July 2019, Jason had no upcoming appointments scheduled at all. Regarding the restraint, the jury found that the force used in restraining Jason was unreasonable, and this more than minimally contributed to his death. They commented, although the degree of force used to bring Jason to the ground was appropriate in the circumstance, the manner in which Jason was restrained on the ground was unreasonable. The degree of force used to maintain the restraint on the ground was excessive, as Jason was restrained in the prone position. The jury found that the use of the prone position during this time rendered the restraint unsuitable. They found that the risk assessment was inadequate. It had been the evidence of the security guards that Jason was breathing and communicating when the police took over, but this version of events was rejected by the jury, who concluded that he had suffered a cardiac arrest during the restraint. The jury also found that having restrained Jason in this unsuitable position, the security guards failed to manage the impact on him, which also caused or contributed to Jason's death. They said, the manner in which Jason was restrained was not endorsed by SIA training, as there was an imminent risk of positional asphyxia when breathing is inhibited, and they did not accept that Jason's vital signs had been monitored by security staff. They commented, there was no clear leadership or management of the restraint by any staff involved in the restraint or from any supervisors or managers, and too many people were involved in the restraint on the ground. Finally, the jury concluded that secure ops staff involved knew or should have known that there was a risk of death which was reasonably foreseeable in the circumstances. Carolyn Galway, solicitor for Vevine Lennon, said, it should have been clear to Jason's mental health team in the days leading up to his death that he was relapsing and needed urgent care. His family have not received any satisfactory explanation as to why this was not provided, or indeed any reassurance that this wouldn't happen again. The security guards, who then forcibly pinned him face down to the ground while he was ill and distressed, were trained to know just how dangerous that was, and they did it anyway. This death should simply not have occurred. Lucy McKay, spokesperson for the charity Inquest, said, security guards clearly have a role in initially responding to incidents like this. They must be adequately equipped and able to do so safely and effectively without putting lives at risk. There have been 4 recent inquests on preventable restraint-related deaths involving security staff, yet there is not yet any accountability, despite the duty of care these staff and the companies employing them have. Urgent action from the Security Industry Authority is required to ensure other licensed staff are reminded of the risk of prone restraint and their responsibilities. While police and authorities must ensure action is taken to hold those responsible for deaths to account. Ultimately, though, Jason's ill health should never have been allowed to escalate to this crisis point, putting him and the public at risk. East London NHS Foundation Trust must respond to the concerns raised by this inquest and ensure action is taken to prevent future harm and deaths. So you can see with both cases there, this case here of Jason Lennon and this case here of Michael Thorley, there are clear similarities between both. Someone being forcibly restrained on the floor, not being monitored, not being supervised, staff not aware of the risks of putting someone on the floor and holding them there for extended periods of time, plus all the other complex issues there led to the deaths of these 2 people. Now, I can confirm, I've been doing this for a long time, that putting someone in the prone position or face down on the floor is not in itself dangerous and may be needed, and there are many organizations out there who manage those type of restraints very, very well. But failing to monitor, failing to train, failing to upskill, failing to make these security staff in this case, aware of the risks of doing it, has led to 2 deaths. And the SIA, doesn't teach prone restraint, so there's a gap there in the training. And what happens then is if a restraint goes to ground, then what's going to happen is the security guards are going to revert to type, and do whatever they think they ought to do, which may be based on something nothing to do with restraint. It might be down to martial arts training or some restraining they've had in the past or MMA training or whatever. But it's that lack of awareness of the risks that have led to these deaths, and it's totally unacceptable. Okay, well, I hope that helps. Speak to you all soon.